Ret is a banger spec in the War Within, and if you haven't considered it yet, you should consider it at least as an alt, if not an actual main, to play it. You might have seen all of the people playing it in Dragonflight and thought, wow, why so many people? Well, let's talk about why so many people play this spec. Obviously, in Dragonflight, it goes without saying that it is a very strong spec in terms of overall damage output and what it actually brings to Mythic Plus and raids. Of course, mostly Mythic Plus, but also in raids, because Ret, after the rework, has received pretty much most of the things that would make Ret great, that the players playing Ret would have loved to see, and they are actually seeing it right now. And this is not anything new. We've done videos about this in the past. You have heard other content creators say it in the past, and you have seen Ret being played in the past or present, or maybe you have played it yourself. And you might be thinking, the War Within, is it good enough to pick it up? Well, you've probably just been engaging with beta content from different content creators, us included, whether it is from, output that Ret does, which is, depending on who you watch, pretty big and still not as much as Death Knights and other specs as well, or looking at tier lists and figure out, Ret isn't seemingly ranked as high. I would imagine because of our experience with Ret, but Ret actually isn't necessarily bad. Maybe it's one of the safest spec you can play in the War Within. First of all, let's knock it out of the park, or off the table, or somewhere, because Ret is not a complex spec, okay? It is a fairly straightforward spec. There are some build diversity that can add a little bit of extra flavor, but overall, it's a very systematic playstyle, very little RNG, although there are some procs here and there that you will be engaging with, and it's only going to be elevated with the hero talents. Templar, which is probably something that most people think when they think about Ret, essentially turns your Wake of Ashes into Hammer of Light. Once you use Wake of Ashes, it turns into Hammer of Light, which is a big spender that does a lot of damage and enables your entire Templar talent tree to function and do other cool stuff like Empyrean hammers falling from the sky and just hitting everything all around. And with the addition of Radiant Glory, which is a new capstone that you may have played with if you're playing the pre-patch right now, that essentially turns Wake of Ashes into Wings, kind of. Once you press Wake of Ashes, you get a short version of Wings. I think it's 6 seconds for the regular Wings and 8 seconds for Crusade. Or is it 8 and 10? Either way, it kind of goes up and down. You get a short version of Wings, but you don't have the actual Avenging Wrath or Crusade anymore on your bars. It's just baked into Wake of Ashes, which, first of all, for Templar, that's pretty great because it also pairs up with your Hammer of Light and all of your hero talent working properly. And it also gives you a different damage profile where your burst is your Wake of Ashes. It kind of slightly reminds me of Legion when Wake of Ashes was the shit, and it's still the shit right now, but it feels like it just activates your entire kit and you have very frequent damage windows. And this is incredibly good, particularly for Mythic Plus, because you're not reliant on your tank pulling a lot of the packs into your damage like, let's say, a mage would be or a Death Knight would be, which are, the comparisons that you usually see Ret being compared to, because those are essentially the big dogs and winners of the War Within. But I think secretly Ret might actually be the best one out of all of them, not necessarily because of the damage throughput. That usually changes, and even when Ret is like the most played spec right now in Dragonflight, I don't think it does the highest damage out of all the specs in any game content. Ret is just really solid, and I think pretty much all specs should follow suit. It does just really good damage, it survives a lot of the things, it has tools that people want in their group from a Ret Paladin, and that's obviously true for the War Within and obviously true for both hero talents. Herald of the Sun, however, just offers like a different version of Ret where you're still baked into the Wings playstyle, but now you activate the dawn spots, the light spots, the down lights. Dude, they've changed the name a bunch of times. Essentially the little beams, the little sun spots that you get from Herald of the Sun that is applied, or are applied rather, to the enemies and your friendlies, because they work both in terms of healing and also dealing damage. If you want to think of Herald of the Sun in one way, think about driving a car. And when you activate your Wake of Ashes and essentially the Herald of the Sun hero talent tree, it's like pressing the gas all the way to the floor. It's way faster, gives you influxes of haste, and it just plays incredible. It doesn't give you like a new ability. I mean, sure, it kind of changes Word of Glory into Eternal Flame, but that's probably more of a Holy Paladin thing than something that you might be interested in. If you feel like it, sure, you can heal people, and Word of Glory has been buffed, but I don't know if it's a good use of your holy power almost ever. But hey, if shit hits the fan, you better believe you can heal yourself and be probably still maybe one of the tankiest DPSers in the game, if not the tankiest. Mages are probably gonna give you a run for your money in terms of your overall tankiness and utility. So essentially everything that you like about Ret or heard good things about Ret are essentially accentuated into the War Within. Sure, you might hear that it has some bugs and some errors. I mean, pretty much all classes do, and of course everything could be better with a little bit more tuning and a little bit more pathing, and not every spec is perfect, but Ret gets as close to it as possible, at least from an average gamer perspective. And let me tell you why, because this is probably why so many people actually play this spec to this day. It is the most popular spec, followed very closely by Beast Mastery Hunter. This is not a Beast Mastery Hunter video, but it is relevant for this point, because why are these two specs the most popular specs in the game, and what do they have in common? Well, one thing that they have in common that you might see very accurately is that they're both very simple spec to pick up. And in a world where everybody just loves more intricate raid fights and dungeon mechanics, and maybe not everybody likes that, or people just praise mage to the bits, still more people play Ret Paladin and Beast Mastery Hunter, and have been doing so for years. At least Beast Mastery, because it was kind of always good. Ret has only been good ever since the rework. And why? Well, it's simple to get into, and sometimes simple is good. It's not simple in a boring way, which I guess maybe Beast Mastery is for some people, us included sometimes. But actually, Frost Death Knight prior to the rework was simpler than both of these specs, and it was actually not played at all because it was simple in a boring way. But Ret, similar with Beast Mastery, is simple in a fun way. The rotation is engaging, the rotation is rewarding, and you feel in control over your gameplay, I suppose, because you're definitely in control of your damage, since you don't really care if you're in a Mythic Plus scenario, how many packs a tank pulls in a raid. You don't really care when the intermission hits, since you always have cooldowns. Always. I think your cooldowns are kind of up like 30-50% of the time. That's more than we can say about a lot of other specs. And because you're in control, you can just do your thing and not really care about all of the other stuff going around. Ironically though, you being in control of your rotation and always being more or less predictable and not tied to external conditions frees up your brain to actually process all of the mechanics going around you. Oh, look at that frontal, I can dodge it. Why? Because, well, my rotation is fairly simple. I just generate holy power and then just spend it with Templar's Verdict. So I have the brain space to see the frontal and just move out of the way and actually not get hit. Although, to be fair, I have seen Ret Paladins still get hit by frontals, and that is unexcusable. And even if you are getting hit by the frontal, you will not die when an enhancement shaman that probably does more damage than you will die. And you know what doesn't do damage? Being dead. That definitely does not do any damage whatsoever. +1 for the Ret Paladins. Ret Paladin is just an easy spec to get into across the board. The hero talents just augment and make it way more fun than it is just baseline and that you have been used to. And there are even more complex mechanics that you can actually get engaged with if they ever get buffed, or if you just want to have some fun, like Divine Hammer, which is a cool revolutionary talent. So revolutionary that the devs haven't really touched it because it just changes the spec so much. And if you don't know, Divine Hammer is basically a replacement of your Consecration with a 2-minute cooldown that just has a hammer spin around you, but it eats a holy power every second. This is slightly problematic because it's akin to Breath of Sindragosa for Frost Death Knight, where is a maintaining type buff ability, where the longer you can just maintain it up, the more damage you do, and while you have it up, it just speeds up your entire rotation, getting your builders to recharge a lot faster, to generate that holy power a lot faster, and it just flips your red brain on its wheels, since you don't know exactly how to play now. Do you use your Templar's Verdict and Divine Storm? Probably Divine Storm, because this is kind of like an AoE talent. or do you just use all of your holy power for Divine Hammer? Once this actually gets baked into the rotation, the spec can just explode in terms of flavor and fantasy related to it. But with that being said, if it's your first time playing a melee, if it's your first time playing WoW, if you just want a break from a complex spec, if you want to take it chill and explore and enjoy the game without racking your brain over a PhD that you need to understand to play Arcane Mage, Ret Paladin is the best spec to get. It doesn't have the most amount of damage, it has very high damage, by the way, as you can probably see from the footage, and it is the safest one to play. A banger of an expansion like the War Within with cool visuals for hero talents, cool rotation that's super fun, fast-paced and rewarding, and you can all have it for the price of leveling 1 Ret Paladin, of course. Or you can explore other aspects of the game like the Frost Death Knight, which is also a pretty kick-ass spec now that it has been reworked, and we have a video here that you can check out and see exactly what's going on, to what was the most boring probably melee in the game before it's reworked, and again something that has evolved with new layers of complexity in the War Within.